Well, hello. Hello. It's been a very long time, and I wanted to do an official wellness check for all of my supporters and constituents throughout the world, especially in the social media community. I want to give you some updates on some very important information that you should know. I have been going through some very different transitions over the last year, beginning with a latter October of 2020 until present. And I will use this particular recording to give you basic information and background so that you must understand what is being facilitated in the territory of Alabama, Marengo County, and Wilcox County areas, to include but not limited to Miami-Dade counties of Florida. As you know, I am an apostolic prophetic individual with great influence as far as insight into dark power, practitioner arts, institutions, confederacies, and the rise and organizations of them throughout the world. I do share this material now so that it can be used in the future by individuals who will need it for insight. You cannot be in positions such as this without great persecution. You must maintain a life of sanctification and holiness so that you can be preserved, excuse me, by the Most High and living God, among other things. I'm going to facilitate a basic narrative of some things that occurred in latter October of 2020. In October of 2020, around the 28th, we were bracing for an onset of a hurricane. But prior to that, I was experiencing some discourse in my place of employment, which would have been classified as Camden School of the Arts and Technology in Camden, Alabama. At that particular time, I had limited documentation, but through the advisory of wise pursuits, I did as I was told. I had questionable insight about things that were being manipulated within my classroom. I would not speak because without information or valid evidence, it can be forged upon you as a level of psychosis. Therefore, I awaited based on wisdom, and I took video footage of my classroom on October 28th. On October 28th, I left that room immaculate, nothing displaced, objects in the proper position, videotape every inch of it. It was a great storm in which we received great destitution and destruction of trees and power outages for over 7 days in some spaces. When I finally returned to my classroom, it was approximately November 10th. When I entered the classroom, November 8th or 10th, I don't have the exact dates, I have to check my notation. Everything was found in order except one particular space in which I displayed my religious relics, and those would be included but not limited to statues, crosses, religious canvases of art with writings on them and scriptures. One particular emblem of my classroom mantra was, don't be content with being average. Average is the same distance from the bottom to the top. That particular object was face down, along with a cross, along with another cross that was on the floor, and a canvas that was face down with some scripture. Another scriptural text had been moved. They were flushed together, but when we returned, they were flushed over. That alone is insignificant that had to be done by an individual, not by wind. So if we eliminated the probability that wind or some form of HVAC, when our current came through to move and knock down the other pieces, the lateral horizontal move of the picture would have proven that a human had to do that. That is impossible, and that was found upon the footage. Upon discovering this, I went to the Camden Police Department to file a hate crime after I did some research and finally realized that this is not something that should be occurring, because it was forged against my specific objects. These things were not stolen, they were manipulated, and they were face down, moved, such as that. and they were religious relics. And after doing some research and considering some other things that I had encountered, I configured that that was a hate crime. Maybe not in the utmost sense of defacing, harming, or injuring, but nevertheless, it was a hate crime. So I went and I wanted to file the report at Camden Police Department, and I didn't receive any feedback or little assistance. Matter of fact, one particular female officer who was in an adjacent room walked in, and she's recorded on audio tape saying, don't put it as a hate crime. What else can you do? Because it's not a misdemeanor. It's not a theft. Nothing was stolen. That was the first incident. Not long after that, my dear friends around the world, at this particular dwelling where this altar presides, there was an individual, I assume while I was lying on the floor and the windows were open, showed up right at dusk when it gets dark, started peering through the windows. They could not see me in the position that I was lying in, and I was unnerved because I don't have company or visitations. This individual moved around on the porch to the other windows, and I assume around the adjacent, did a circumference around the house to see if they could find any form of movement or notation that I was actually in the dwelling. I later reported this to my local police department in Marengo County. Around Thanksgiving of last year, actually the day before, I actually constructed a security door in front of my other door with 3/4-inch plyboard because I did not have the resources to order instantly a security door. But common sense lets us know if you have various barriers, if you are to have a break-in or intruder, that will be a little more difficult for them to invade. So I left for Thanksgiving, in which I spent at Ross Bridges in Birmingham, Alabama. And after some travel, I returned for the holiday here around December 6th or 7th. But before that night was over, I spent one night, I had another intruder attempt. And this time there were multiple people. Of course, I could not see them because I had used black their shades, black shades, and I did darken curtains so that people could not tell if I were home or not, especially if I parked in the back or on the side. They could not discern my activity based on light, because that one incident of someone patrolling my house with me in it to see if I was here without knocking on the door as to be courteous. Welcome guests, and if they're coming for good, they knock on the door and they inquire if you're home, at least call your name or something, even if they're trying to do a surprise visit. This was not the case. So after the second attempt, which was very aggressive, in which I even can vouch for dogs and multiple people outside attempting to engage to dislodge the plyboard and the security chain from it. This was a very disturbing instance for me. I left my home, and in about a week I returned to pick up the police report that I did file. I did call upon the, excuse me, my eyes itching. I did call upon the local police department to come out. There were two individuals who came out, and they gave me faulty information. One thing I inquired, I said, now, in the cases like this, even though I was nervous and I was fearful for my life, I had to fire my firearm. I asked them very bluntly, when can I kill them? Because they were actually trying to invade my home. At that particular time of the second home invasion, I did not have videography on the premises to document what had occurred. The two police officers looked around and they inquired if there were cameras, and they left for no reason. I don't care who you are and what jurisdiction you are located. I had never had in this location any calls from the police of any faulty calls saying that there were invaders or intruders or any sort. There was no municipal reason why an authentic police report should not have been filed by those two officers. Once they noticed that there were no video cameras here, they felt the need not to, which is an illegal action that should have been brought under sanctions by the local individuals. Later on, however, I did come return and I had to file the police report myself. Unfortunately, though I've had no negative interaction with the local police department of Marengo County, they instantly asked me if I were with mental health. And at that particular junction, I realized then that due to the exploits in the neighboring county, I was probably going to be signaled or targeted in this territory for a diagnosis of mental illness. And I thus prepared myself for it. Realizing then that a fraudulent diagnosis would end up and conclude with HIPAA violations, not only malpractice, but medical negligence, I went along with their pursuits. And being that I needed medical care, I had to have medical care. So I began to record my medical visitations thereafter, because they never assumed that I would ever leave the territory to acquire objective, valid medical care. Beginning with the initial visit after I returned to the territory in March, because until then, from the latter part of December, I wasn't in the Marengo County area. However, I was defrauded in Montgomery, Alabama by a couple named Andrew and Deanna, which I have on videotape, falsifying information with Airbnb. And they defrauded me out of $763 that I can document, but I could get no assistance from Airbnb because of the way they actually facilitated the transaction. But there is hope for some form of small claims court, because I do have the audio tape and the information clearly stating that they agreed to give me my refund. This was the beginning of my journey to Miami. I was there in the Florida area for January, that part of January, all the way to March, in which I did return. When I returned in March, I went straight to the rural health clinic. And there's a physician there who wanted to offer information that I was nervous. Look at me. I'm never nervous shaking. The only way you know I'm nervous is that I articulate it, and I will articulate it when I am nervous. I don't have jitters or tremors. These are things that you should know. I don't glitch, tick, or itch. I don't have compulsions or outbursts. Very well composed at all times. I noticed then that was something they wanted to use, anxiety and nervousness, although I did not have that at the beginning of the March corridor when I returned. But as time progressed and the stress forged against me, I did acquire several diagnoses from the pain and suffering and the strain that I've had to endure all year, being without income, suitable housing at times, support, and many other things that are necessary for a person to have a wholeness and wellness. As I pursued my medical pursuits, I began to record all of my medical visitations with the understanding that there was probably an intent to forge something upon me. So I left and I went to Florida in order to pursue proper medical care. I left televisit and telephone appointments on the books in Alabama just to see how far they would go. The first appointment was November 1st with a therapist, and I recorded absolutely everything that I said. I also gave them authorizations to obtain medical records from the Rural Health Agency only and the CVS pharmacy. I gave them authorization that I would receive, listen at me carefully, verbally, I would receive social work services, and I was specific that I needed help with housing because I wanted another housing solution in the area. I'm telling you this so that when you're speaking to individual, you don't just say yes or no. You speak and you render information with explication. As an English teacher, you learn that the explanation gives the supporting evidence that would have to be used later. So I was never a yes or no client. I gave explication and specification for everything I said. But I did not do this. I did not verbally consent to family and significant other participation in treatment. I never consented. I also notified the practitioner that I, Tashia Craig, have suffered short-term memory loss, documented with a neurologist referral. Therefore, my practitioner was aware of my disability. And with that disability, they decided to forge a statement to acquire information. This particular statement to acquire information is illegal. It is a third degree offense in HIPAA violations that will give somebody maximum fines on the federal government side and up to 10 years imprisonment. I have diagnoses from this institution, codes that are obscure to me, in which I will be inquiring of the notation really soon. People of God, I want you to be aware of the wiles and the attacks of the enemy, because it is true. There are significant signatures upon this that have approved this. I can't wait to get the diagnoses that were forged from the same information I have relayed unto you, no other things. This is an interesting, what I call empirical study upon the pursuits of the wicked. Never underestimate the wicked among you. You never know how far the confederacies and the conspiracies go. Today I'm speaking of medical care. If, however, you have received faulty medical records, you can request that these medical records be altered by crossing out the information, giving them the proper information that should be imparted. Unlike most of you, I have audio recordings of my visitation, so there's no ifs, ands, or buts about what I'm saying, and it can be permissible in court because of my disability of short-term memory loss, in which these individuals are equivalent or acquainted with. Therefore, to fraud or to defraud my medical records would be intentional. I want you to also prepare yourself if you're in the middle of controversy of any kind, whether you're at work, whether it's in the community, whether it's with your own spouse. There are two anointed vessels that I want to show you that you need in your arsenal of protection and wisdom. This is an audio recorder. It has high frequency. It will pick up in your purse anywhere. You should not leave home without it, and you should have it in practically every conversation you facilitate, depending on the extent of the controversy or scandal or whatsoever you might be a part of. It will record hundreds of hours of video, of audio. This anointed vessel is called a body camera. It picks up the sound and the action. You should have this on or the other one on when you have police stops, when you go into various social places. If you consider that those individuals may forge some form of accusation, it's not paranoia. Because an accusation of misbehavior, misconversation, anything can cost you in matters such as this. So these two anointed vessels, especially this anointed vessel, and even your camera, your iPhone camera, I would advise you to use it also. Never do a televisit or a telemedicine without recording your audio or your video. It's best to have both of them. You need an iPhone or these electronic devices because your words can be misconstrued and there's no way for you to validate it. In some states and instances, it's automatically legal for you to record it. In other states, it's not acceptable by the state limitations. But if your case has a federal jurisdiction, you'll be able to use your audio recordings to use them against your in your legal counsel if necessary. If you find that your records have been altered or you've been misdiagnosed by any individual, you have a right to report them to their local agencies of licensure, whether they're state or federal. File an official complaint with them, because if you don't report it, it doesn't happen. Your footage, if you're smart enough, excuse me, my eyes itching. If you're smart enough, your footage will be used in the case, especially if you're found to have a disability. It will definitely be used because they are not going to take kindly of people taking advantage of the disabled. Especially if there's any form of cognitive dysfunctionality, they will have to use your audio and your video footage in those instances because that is the voice of reason. Ladies and gentlemen, I am well, I am healthy. I, however, have a little anxiety. When I'm anxious or have anxiety, I don't tremble. I don't excessively talk. I have to pause myself to get things done. At this stage in my life, I'm not able to do excessively multiple things because of the strain and the stress from the last year. As of latter November of last year, I did not have hypertension and anxiety with compulsion, excessive compulsive disorder, which means I like things in a certain way. And when they're not in that order, it has gone to another level. You can be a neat person. It affects your stability and your means of adjusting yourself. I like things in a certain way. I can actually tell you that trauma is a real thing. And after you experience trauma, you need to find some reputable care individuals who will assist you, and reputable individuals who will not falsify information. Lastly, before I close in this wellness check for me, I did have a psychiatric evaluation, and I recorded the evaluation, and I found that the particular practitioner was intentionally leading the discussion with certain questions that were directly related to particular diagnoses. I immediately reported that individual to their particular place of work and will continue to report them to regulatory institutions. Because of their fortitude to forge a particular diagnosis, there will have to be up and coming legal actions and sanctions placed upon them, including civil suits and malpractice or malnegligence, because it is livid that the attempt was made without question, without any form of misunderstanding. Any individuals who will reevaluate this information will come to the same conclusion. This is why, my people, if you believe that your attorneys or even your medical officials are involved or connected to other individuals with the intent to falsify information and forge a premature or illegitimate diagnosis upon you, you need to be prepared, literally, and armed with recording information or tools that you will have to use or can be used later for evidence. The final thing I want to discuss, my financial issues this year should not have been, but there is legitimate documentation of the forging of information from a medical doctor upon an insurance policy that I did have that should have been paying me even until this day my monthly income. It was found in American Fidelity Databases that this particular doctor forged information. She gave one set of information to me and the other set to them. Because of this, the payout has been withheld, and I'm not certain of what decisions they will make. It really doesn't matter. When your physicians seek to defile your reputation, they seek to falsify information, and it is legitimately documented, you have legal rights to not only file federal complaints against them, local complaints with the governmental organizations of the state, but also to pursue legal actions that should result most times in compensation. Being that I have not had income for the last year, and I've suffered greatly for it. Even in the midst of all that has happened, I am entitled to full compensation for what I have not received, pain and suffering, and many other things, and including the onset of other disabilities because of the strenuous stress that I've had not having certain life essential things. People of God, I love you. But it's a time when we must discuss reality. The reality possibly of persecution, it's a real thing. The reality of confederacies and individuals, groups, systems, governmental organizations being aligned against you, that is a possibility. Just in case you may have a similar possibility. We're not saying that people are after us or whatever. It's just many coincidences that have occurred. And I've shared these coincidences with you. Just in case you have these coincidences, be wise. Gear up with your anointed vessels. You need something other than oil sometimes to get you out of the lion's mouth. You need pictures. You need audio. You need conversation. And you need sometimes forged documentation. This has been Tashia Craig with a wellness update, letting you know that as of this day and this hour, I am completely fine. It is November 27th. It's a Saturday, and I'm completing this call at 9:13 a.m. You guys be blessed, and I will from time to time step in to give you further wellness. We're going to continue the month of December of 2021. I'm going to be on this magnificent altar, giving you nothing but the truth, and that you may prevail and that your wisdom may increase. For we have to be wiser than our opponents, and we have to be harmless as a dove. Until next time, this is Tashia Craig. Love you.